This happened about a year ago, yet it still keeps me awake at night. Living in the UK, autumn brings early darkness around 4 p.m. It was fall break at school, so all the kids were at home, including my girlfriend's brother. We had been together for over a year, so her family knew me well enough, and her brother enjoyed my company. With her parents going out of town across the country for a day, my girlfriend had to take care of her brother. However, she was dealing with some personal stress, so I offered to help and watch over him. I asked their parents, and they were fine with the idea. I arrived in the morning and we went out to breakfast, then returned to the house. Afterward, I took her brother to the park. It was around 2 p.m. The place was absolutely crowded. As the sun began to set, the park emptied out completely by 4 p.m. I texted my girlfriend to let her know we'd be heading home soon, and she replied with, "Okay." To be honest, I completely lost track of time. Her brother and I were having a blast with the park all to ourselves. We stood on top of a tall climbing frame with a slide. It was nearly pitch black, so I used my phone as a flashlight. Suddenly, I got a notification on my screen, and it was my girlfriend asking where we were. I quickly replied, "Oops, coming home now," and told her brother we had to go. He sighed and asked if we could go down the slide. Of course, I said yes. As we took our final slide down, I noticed a man standing at a distance under one of the paralleled streetlights. He wore a trench coat and a beanie hat. I immediately moved the kid behind me and greeted the man with a friendly, "Hi there." To my surprise, all I got in response was a low groan. He began swaying back and forth. The bright light's reflection revealed drool sliding down his chin, his eyes empty and expressionless. An uneasy feeling came over me, so I grabbed my girlfriend's brother while keeping a watchful eye on the strange man. I headed towards the path leading to the house, taking the exit on my left. I made sure to look back to check if he was following us, but he just stood there in the same spot. The path he was on eventually merged with a larger main path through some bushes just like the one we had taken. We walked for a couple of minutes, occasionally looking back thinking we were safe. I was on a well-lit, straight stretch of the path when I spotted him again. He was standing under one of the streetlights looking up, and I saw he was playing with something in his hands. When I looked closer, I realized it was a knife. I kept walking, constantly looking behind me. My girlfriend's little brother tucked his head into my chest, scared. I began to notice something odd. The man seemed to move towards new streetlights every time I looked back. At first I thought it might be my imagination, but as I counted them, I was sure that the 2 streetlights behind him had become 5. In the background, I could faintly hear that eerie groaning sound, and he occasionally moaned as well. I started to walk faster, trying to get to my girlfriend's house quicker. That was when I heard him behind the row of bushes. The moaning took on a more sinister tone. He must have started running because I heard his heavy footsteps pounding down the pathway. When I turned around one last time, my worst fears were true. The man was chasing after us. I broke in an immediate sprint and didn't stop until I was in the alleyway right behind my girlfriend's house, hiding behind a bush. I spammed her cell phone with text messages to open the back gate. I held her brother tightly until she let us in. It felt like an eternity. Once inside, I made my way to the front of the house hoping that I'd lost him, but we weren't that lucky. He was circling the street, right where we had been hiding. He was still moaning, clutching the knife tightly, and went on a rampage, knocking over people's bins. I called the police, but he was gone before they got there. As far as I know, they never found him. Several months later, I heard about a similar incident on a local Facebook page, but once again, it didn't lead to anything. We haven't been to that park ever since. Her parents thanked me for keeping their son safe and didn't hold any ill will against me for the situation. My girlfriend's brother still has nightmares about that day. And as for me, I still find myself looking over my shoulder every time I'm alone on the street. At the age of 8, I experienced something that would scar me for the rest of my life. This all happened in 1991, so my brothers and I weren't distracted by video games or cell phones. We were always playing outside, and despite the age difference between me and my older brothers, who were 10 and 12, we played together as we lived in a neighborhood where there weren't that many kids around. It was a village in the Norwegian countryside, and for the most part, was a safe place to play around. There was an old abandoned property near our home. Surrounded by greenery, it was an ominous sight to see when walking by the house. Our parents warned us never to go there. We thought since they told us not to, the place must have been haunted. In reality, it was just an old building, damaged from age and vandalism. One day, my oldest brother Sindre dared my brother Emil and me to step into the house garden. We started going there often and thought of it as our secret playground. The garden was surrounded by large trees, a shallow pond, and a hidden well which led to some interesting adventures there. Soon after, our parents began asking if we had gone to the abandoned house. We of course denied it, but realized that someone must have told them about our whereabouts. We were just kids, unworried about our actions. A couple of weeks later, we decided to venture into the cellar that was attached to the house. It was raining hard that day, as it was in the middle of fall. The plan was to break into the cellar and write our names on the wall to claim it as our own personal hideout spot. The floors were made of dirt, and it appeared to be a place to store vegetables. However, once we were down there, the hatch that we had broken into slammed shut. It was completely pitch dark, so I began to scream. My two older brothers struggled with the door until it finally opened, but standing on the other side of it was a man holding a small axe. Quickly, Sindre closed the hatch back down. "Come on out, trespassing little brats," the voice growled, tapping the door with the back of his axe. "Hell no," Sindre yelled back. "All right, little brats, I know you're all in there, all three of you little punks. Does your mommy know where you are? Does she? I bet she doesn't. No one will look for you," he threatened. Appearing that he had another object, he started banging on the door. I soon realized he was using a hammer to nail the door shut, trapping us in the cellar. Panicking, I ran towards the hatch, leaving just enough space for an arm to lift through. To my horror, he grabbed his axe, ready to attack me. "Come on now, come on out. It's the better choice, really. It must be awfully dark and damp in there. Aren't you afraid of the dark? Go on, let your little brother out," he laughed, his voice slurring his words. At this point, Emil began pleading for the man to let us go, promising that we'd never come back. Meanwhile, thunder and lightning lit up the sky. "I might come back to let you out one day, or maybe I'll butcher all three of you," the man whispered as he hammered the hatch once more. Emil and I were terrified, so Sindre did his best to calm us down. He was convinced the man was just trying to scare us. Helpless, we waited, hoping the man would grow tired of this cruel game. However, as time passed, we feared that he might have actually left us there for good. Sindre suggested that we count to 100 and then search for a loose stone in the walls to break the door. We finally found one and started hitting the bottom of the door, creating a small hole. Since my brothers were too big to fit through the gap, it was up to me to break down the door once I reached the other side. When I was finally free, I looked around and confirmed that the man had indeed abandoned us there. Sindre instructed me to grab the hammer and break open the hatch. I was still shaking from the fear the man could come back and kill me, or worse, I would escape him, leaving my two brothers to die at the hands of the axe. Fortunately, I managed to break down the door, and the three of us fled through the garden, running back home for our lives. When we got home, our parents were absolutely livid, wanting to know why we were muddy and bruised. We never told them what happened. As adults, to this day, my brothers and I have never set foot on that property or crossed paths with that demented man again. When I was 14, my family moved across the states to North Carolina. Exhausted from the travel, we went out to grab dinner before picking up the keys to the new house. We stopped by a pizza shop and ate in the car because we had our dogs. I've always been a fast eater, so when I finished, I took one of our dogs for a walk while my family continued eating. Growing up in Florida, we didn't experience the changing seasons, and the sight of autumn leaves falling was new to me. It immediately caught my attention. As I played with the leaves, I suddenly felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around to find a man in his mid-40s to 50s standing there. My dog, being her usual friendly self, tried to jump on him, and I quickly pulled her away. His mouth turned into a devilishly creepy smile. "You have my dog, my border collie," he said. His voice was southern and scruffy. Red flags began going off inside my head. My dog was obviously a boxer. The dogs looked nothing alike. I'm bad at confrontation, so I nervously exclaimed, I think you're mistaken, sir. This is my dog." I looked at my parents' car, which was only a few feet away. They hadn't noticed a man had approached me as they were on their phones. The man asked me, "Well, could you come help me look for my dog?" My stomach began to ache, but I was second-guessing myself on if this was actually happening or if I was just overreacting. But I've read and heard about many kidnapping horror stories, so I knew all the tricks. At this point, he seemed desperate for me to go with him, saying, "I have money in my truck for you if you come with me." I grew increasingly nervous. This could not be happening to me. He pointed over to a rundown, sketchy-looking truck. I told him I was busy and hoped he found his dog. I should have told him my parents were there, but I wanted to stay on his good side. If I had, maybe he would have left me alone. Instead, he grabbed my dog's leash and pulled her towards his truck, saying he had dog treats inside. I snatched my dog back and firmly said, "I have to go now," then started walking away. But he grabbed my wrist and yanked the leash from my grip, dragging me closer to his truck. I'll never forget his words, "Just come see what I have for you." My dog trailed behind us and began to bark. While dragging me, he added, "I'm pretty small, 5'4", and I have no upper body strength." I started screaming, begging him to let me go. My parents must have heard my terrified screams and my dog's frantic barking. They sprinted after me as I called out, "Mom, Dad!" The man appeared to be spooked when he realized my parents were approaching, and it dawned on him that they had been nearby in their car all along. He made a run for it, but we didn't pursue him. Their main concern was my well-being. It wasn't the welcome we expected in a new state. I was fortunate that my parents were there to keep me safe, but not everyone may be as lucky.